Hello and welcome to day 5 of 100 Grammar with Mariia. Today we're going to speak about questions, 2 other kinds of questions that we haven't spoken about yet. These are subject questions or questions to the subject, and then we have tag questions. I'm going to explain each of these right now. But as always, we start with a quote, famous quote, if not you, then who? If not now, then when? You notice that we use 2 question words here. We have who, and here we have when. We've spoken about this question word already when we talked about object questions or special questions. When we ask a question especially to some part in the sentence. It's in day 4. Information is there. And this question word, who, is one of the question words which we use when we ask questions to the subject in the sentence. So one of these is who, then we can use what, we can use which. But first of all, we have to know what the subject is. So the subject in the sentence can be a person or thing that performs the action, that does something. And almost always the subject is, so we have subject, predicate. This is the order in almost all the sentences. After predicate, if we ask a question, we have an object. So, I like you. Which word is the subject? Like, you do something, will be the predicate, the verb. You have the subject, S, the subject. It should be before the predicate. So, I or you. What is the subject? I, you're right. And you see, I underlined with one line. So here we have I, we have predicate, and then whom do I like? I ask questions from the verb, and here we have this object. Today we're going to speak about subjects. So you notice in these sentences, when we identify the verb, when we know where the verb is, before the verb we'll have the subject. Here we have these 2 sentences. I like you, you like me. So we're going to ask a question to the subject. So the rule is that instead of the subject, you use the question word. You do not need any auxiliary verbs in this case. No auxiliary verbs. You just change the subject into this question word. And then you have a question. So instead of saying I is a person, right? So I'm a person. So I, instead of using I, we're going to use who. When you ask about people, you use who. Sometimes which as well, but who is more important. So here I write who. So this is number 1 rule. No auxiliary verbs. Very important. No auxiliary verbs. And number 2 rule is we use S very often with the verb. So if we do not have S and it's the present indefinite tense form, we need to add this S. So we think that after who is singular. So I can write here, singular who. So let's see what we have. I like you. Who? Here we have like. But remember what I told you? After who is singular. So we need to add something. What should I add here? Who like? Yes, you're right. Who likes you? Who likes you? We have a question. The second one, you like me. Again, you're a person, so we use who again. Who Like
Like.
me, you're right. Who likes me? Very good. The next one we have, he stayed there for a long time. He stayed there. Again, we have the verb stayed. We understand that he is the subject. We ask a question. We have to replace this word with the question word. Again, he is a person, so we use who. And look, stayed is the past indefinite tense form. You see, ed. We do not change anything. So the tense form in this sentence, in the past indefinite, is the same. The difference will be with this word. We'll talk about it later. So he stayed there. So again, what we do, instead of saying he, we use the word who. So we have again, who stayed there for a long time. And we should not forget a question mark at the end. Here we have another sentence. These markers are very good. Let's say these markers are very good. When I have these markers and I speak about markers, I can use this question word. Instead of saying these, I can write which. Which markers are very good? So in fact, we ask this to this part, to these word. But here we have this verb, here we have this subject, these markers is the subject. If I want to ask a question to this whole phrase, these markers, I need to change it with the word. So we know markers are not people. We cannot use who, which we can use only to this part when we know, when we see what we can choose from. So the only thing is left, what. So in this case, these markers, when we want to ask a question to this whole subject, we use this question word, what. And again, we have what are. Is it correct?
No.
No, what should we change? So instead of are, we have to change it into what? Is. You're right. What is very good? These markers are very good. So again, after this, who, what, we treat them as singular. So we think singular as in the present indefinite tense form, as this. Here we have are, here we have like, we add s, or we change the form that has s at the end. And then we have here another sentence. They were always late. They were always late. The past indefinite tense form, we have be form. Here were, they, people. Which words should we use?
Who.
Who, very good. So instead of saying they, we write who. And then here we have where. Should we keep the same word, where, who, where, or who was, you're right. Singular, was, where is plural. Very good. Who was always late? They were always late. Very good. You notice we have asked questions and the answer will be always the subject, which is before the predicate in the sentence. So in the first place, the subject and then the predicate. Very good. Subject questions. Now we move to the second part, tag questions. You notice I have written this comma here. You notice that this is almost the same sign, almost the same here. If you write it in this position, it's an apostrophe. When you put it over here, it will be a comma. Tag questions are some kind of questions that we use when we want to confirm the information. We are not sure. For example, my house is big, but I want you to tell me if you think that my house is big. So I want to ask you this question, this tiny part. So I add it at the very end. So in first, this step will be, instead of using this full stop, I mark it as comma, because I'm going to continue with this short part. My house is big. What should I write here to the side? These are the steps you need to take. The first one is plus or minus. This means the positive sentence or negative sentence. The positive sentence is something that you state, that you say, yes, it's true. For example, my house is big, and I want to nod, you see? It means this part is positive. My house is big. If the first part is positive, the second part should be negative. It means that when we use the auxiliary verb, we need to use it a negative form, so with a negation. So we need to add not and make it a short form. We talked about short forms in day 4 video. My house is big. Plus, minus, we have decided that. Number 2, auxiliary verb. You remember auxiliary verbs which help, so we can say helping verbs. Can you tell me which auxiliary verb we need to use in this sentence? Have you noticed something? Here I have this I. If you see the forms of some verbs, you can use them. Do you see any form of the verb that we can use as auxiliary verb?
Houses.
Yeah, houses. Something's here. You're right. What is the word here? What is the word that is hidden?
Is.
Is, right. So my house is big. So we know that is auxiliary verb. We are going to use it. We're going to write it down. And it has to be negative. So is negative will be isn't. And remember short form. Isn't. And the last step is short subject. We've talked about subject. We've talked about short forms that we use another pronoun instead of the subject. And the exception is there. If you have this word there, this subject, you can use it as well. But other pronouns should be used like I, you, we, he, she, it, they. Nothing else. And there, of course. So my house, which pronoun can you use instead of my house? It or he? It. Isn't. Instead of saying my house, we say it. That's all. We've asked the question. My house is big, isn't it? The second one. My friends share the same interests. So help me, tell me, is it a positive or negative sentence? I say, many friends share the same interests.
Positive.
Positive. So you see, I mark for myself. So I need to make sure that I do not forget that I need to make a negative form of this auxiliary verb here. Plus, minus, minus, plus, like a battery, plus, minus. And of course, we continue, we have to have this comma here. Many friends share the same interests. Do you see any of the forms of auxiliary verbs that we can use? Share is the verb which will help you to identify this auxiliary verb. So share is the verb, but we do not have any's, are, was, were, shall, will, nothing. But look at this verb form. We do not have any ending. It means that this is the present indefinite tense form, the simple form. And in that case, we can use only 2 auxiliary verbs. I hope you remember these are do or does. So which of these forms should we use? Do or does if you have many friends?
Does.
Many, not one, not single S. Many.
Do.
Do. Many friends share the same interests. And again, we have do and we have to make it negative. So what should I write here?
Do they?
Do not or don't?
Don't they?
Don't they. Very good. So instead of saying many friends, we say they. Amazing. Then we have the last one. There aren't many flowers in the field. We have a comma here. Tell me, is it a positive or negative for step number 1? There aren't many flowers in the field.
Negative.
Negative. So here I mark as positive. So this part will be a positive part. Then you notice maybe that we have this not part with the verb, and you know that to make a negative sentence we use auxiliary verbs. So this are is already there. You know you used it already to make it negative. So this sentence to make it negative. There aren't many flowers in the field. So you understand that we use are, but should I write aren't or only are form? Are, because it has to be positive. You're right. So here I write are and there. They are there. And here we have this question mark. Thank you. That was all. So please practice at home. Ask questions to the subject. Remember the word before the predicate. To the subject, you can use one of these words, who, what, which. You do not need any auxiliary verb, but you have to remember that after who and after what, we have singular, there has to be S form in the present indefinite tense form. And then we have 10 questions here. Tiny part that we add at the end of the sentence. But first, you have to decide if this is a positive or negative sentence. Then you look for auxiliary verbs. You use them as the first word in this part that you write, and then you use the short form of the subject. And their word is always used. There are some exceptions when you make a request, when you make an offer, or when you give an order. You do not have the same pattern plus minus. You have plus, plus, or minus plus. But this is additional information. We're going to speak about that when we work with the future indefinite tense. So not in this video. Thank you for participating. See you next time. Goodbye.